Can you explain, in a nutshell, the meaning of your famous falsifiability criterion in relation with your critical philosophy?
Yes. When I was about 19, so 2 years older than Sir John Eccles, when he had a similar experience, I was struck by the tremendous difference between the attitude of physicists towards physics and the attitude of some psychologists towards psychology. What interested me so much was the following. Einstein, who at that time became very famous because he had predicted a certain effect in eclipses. He had predicted that if you observe the sun during an eclipse, then the stars near the sun become visible, that one knew, and these visible stars would appear to be further removed from each other than they would be at other occasions. Now, Einstein became very famous at this time, and what struck me was that he repeatedly said, he made certain predictions, and then repeatedly said, if this prediction should turn out wrongly, then my theory is false. Now, try to think of something similar about Freud, who also at that time became very famous. Try to think what possibly could a man do what couldn't be explained by psychoanalysis. Whether he jumps into a sea, into a lake, or whether he throws a child into the lake and jumps after it and takes with life danger the child out. There could be no conceivable action of a person which could not be explained in psychoanalytic terms. But there can be very many things which cannot be explained in Newtonian terms or in Einsteinian terms. If this glass, which contains incidentally apple juice, if this glass would begin to hop just along, and we investigate it and find there's nothing unusual with this glass, then we would have to give up many physical theories, especially Newtonian mechanics, and with it even Einsteinian theory. Einsteinian theory can explain a lot, but this hopping of the glass, it could not explain. As opposed to this, let us say our chairman would begin to hop, then this could be very easily explained in psychoanalytic terms. Here you see the difference between two ways of things which both called themselves science. And I said that what is characteristic of genuine science is that it can be refuted by experience. That is to say that something like this is conceivable, which would refute it. While a science is not genuine, if whatever happens, it is always right. If a so-called science is such that it can explain anything you want, then I said it was a pseudoscience.
Well, but can you demonstrate, Sir Karl, what's the superiority of your falsifiability criterion in relation to the verifiability criterion or principle of the logical positivist of the Vienna Circle?
Yes. It so happens that all this happens in the year 1900, about 1919. I'm wrong. I was not 19 but 17 like you.
Yes. Sorry.
It happened in the year 1919, and several years later, in Vienna. I'm born in Vienna and grew up in Vienna. Several years later in Vienna, there developed a circle of very interesting people. The circle was usually called the Vienna Circle. And this circle, under the influence of a philosopher who since has become very famous, namely Ludwig Wittgenstein, under the influence of this philosopher, this circle did engage itself in a similar problem as I did, but a different problem. There was a certain similarity and a certain difference. Let us start with the difference. The difference was that the circle looked for a criterion of sense. Now, the Vienna Circle said language falls into two parts. One part is nonsense. To this part belongs bibabo, or why. That is nonsense. It's language, but nonsense. And to this part belongs the whole of philosophy. So they said, only science was sense. Only science, as opposed to philosophy, was real sense. And the criterion of science was verifiability. That is to say, we could establish the certainty of the scientific proposition. If you can prove something, then it's science, and certain, and you can put it in your pocket. Now you possess something. You possess certainty, and this certainty is sense and science at the same time. So here was one difference. And I didn't say that all philosophy was nonsense, but I said that philosophy was partly non-scientific insofar as it could not be refuted. That part of philosophy which was irrefutable certainly was not scientific. For that reason it wasn't necessarily bad. There can be excellent philosophy which is not refutable. Refutability is not a criterion of sense. So I wasn't against all philosophy, and I wasn't a philosopher of sense and nonsense. The Vienna Circle made the distinction between sense and nonsense. And it so happens, and here is the similarity, it so happens that it said the criterion of sense is also the criterion of scientific character. And both is verifiability. While I said the criterion of scientific character, which is not necessarily the criterion of sense at all, is falsifiability.